So June 2018, Owen and I appeared for our big conference speech to you. And we also have some very exciting news. We are the first people to win the Richard Driscoll Memorial Award by HQIP for involving patients in national audits.
So the first thing that the team wanted to do, they had their first meeting in January, and that's where it kind of coincided with their report being published, which is about all of the things that they found out from the clinic chats over last year. So that's when, as a team, we were going and finding out what's important to children and young people in their epilepsy care. So in January, they had their first meeting. We had new members join, which was really exciting, from all over the country. Loads of other people that said that they really wanted to come but couldn't come on that day. So the numbers are building and the interest is always there. And they decided to look at all the topics and the information that they'd found out so far and pick one really to focus on for the year. And that is supporting patients and their families with their worries and anxieties around their epilepsy. So that meant that they had to look through everything that they found out in the clinic chats, everything from the PREM data from the last couple of rounds, and then really think about actually what did that mean for them and what difference could they make. So they decided that they wanted to do something that helps services to know what's important to their patients, but also gives them as services top tips that comes directly from the patients and their families. So the plan was to find out what support is on offer. They wanted to check out who knows about that support. They wanted to give those tips to patients, families and to services, really to show that it's a joint venture and there's collaboration, and to start the clinic chat checklist. Now, I'm really glad they came up with that name because it's like the most complicated thing to say fast, some kind of like tongue twister. So the clinic chat checklist, and really to think about actually who is part of that epilepsy team. And as you can see, the people that they put in their epilepsy team is probably far bigger than maybe some of you are thinking might be in your epilepsy unit or team already. And it was quite important from the patients and families that were involved in January that we did think this broad about that wider epilepsy team that does include school nurses and receptionists and consultant secretaries and people that are helping out in the clinic that day and GPs and the whole team, including charities, youth workers, support organisations, as well as the specialists that are in the room. So really thinking about this, we then had to think about what happened next. But then everybody knew about the Epilepsy 12 youth advocates.
Okay, so in February and then in March, obviously following on from the big success of last year's conference and winning our prestigious award, myself and Rachel got booked to do more speaking events as Epilepsy 12 youth advocates. Firstly, it was the launch of the Paediatrics 2040 programme held by the President, Professor Russell Viner, in February. And we expressed our views and hopes for the next generations of paediatricians, and specifically looked at how they use technology to help patients about making sure they're always constantly improving mental health support in epilepsy care. And then in March, we were lucky enough to actually speak in the House of Lords and taking part in the all-party parliamentary group meeting on young people's health, and we talked about the NHS long-term plan and how obviously improving services is important, but actually the most integral part is actually the inclusion of the children, young people and their families along the way. Obviously linking again to why we think worries and anxieties are one of the key areas to focus on. Obviously we spoke about mental health there in epilepsy care as well, and obviously we don't need to explain to you that epilepsy and mental health come hand in hand, but obviously often the simplest issues like clinic times and delays can raise stress levels as well. But obviously sharing your experiences really does help the research and ultimately can save lives.
So in April, the youth advocates met again, and we thought more about the clinic chat checklists that we designed to help services. So we looked at how other services go and look and evaluate what is the best service, looking at things like You're Welcome, Young Inspectors, participant evaluation, 15 steps challenge and others. We found that some of them are very complicated, they can be a bit boring, they can repeat themselves and get a bit confusing as well. So we want to create one that is helpful and says what the gold standard is, and then it can give you tips that are easy things to do, and if you don't have access to a lot of money. And we also want to give you ideas of some fundraising ideas that you can used to help patients and their families who need the support about worries and anxieties, all related to epilepsy. So children, young people and their families have said to us through all the different questionnaires like PREMS in other years and in the clinic chats last year that the one thing they really want help with is this worry and anxiety, and we're hoping that our project can help. So it isn't all about doing something else that someone is already doing. We just want everyone to know and help people access the information that's already out there.
If I seem a bit tired today, it's because only 3 hours ago I had a seizure, but I would still like to share my experiences with you. In May, EP12 youth advocates and 40 plus other young people and parents/carers went to the RCPCH annual conference in Birmingham and shared a journey. I shared a journey on stage to 750 people, and I said, "Hi, my name's Finn. I'm 14. 6 weeks ago, I was also on stage, but that time I wasn't talking to people about my experiences with epilepsy. I was in a play called 15 Streets because drama is one of the things I love to do. Although that day the audience wasn't as big as it was today. I had my first tonic-clonic seizure when I was 10 years old. I was making my packed lunch when it happened. I went rigid, fell backwards, and hit my head on the radiator. One of my brothers found me having the seizure. He went straight to get my mum and dad, but because we play a lot of tricks on each other, they didn't believe him until he started to cry. I then had quite a lot of tests and was diagnosed with epilepsy. Although it was a tough time and I realised that now some things may be more difficult for me or that I may be restricted from some of the things I'd like to do, I know I'm still the same person and I'm just the same as anybody else. I started seeing my consultant and lots of other healthcare professionals, and we have ended up having to try quite a few different medications over the past few years. All through this time, I felt the people who treated me put me first, and this really helped me to understand that I was the most important thing in the process, not my epilepsy. I'm in charge of my life. I have had a few injuries from seizures over the last few years. I have face planted a good few pavements and hospital corridors, give my staff at my local M&S a fright with all the blood when it spilled from my chin, leaving their shop one evening. I managed to get a free strike out of that one there. And I've even forced A&E to start to change one of their mirrors when I cracked it with the back of my head. My dad says, wouldn't it be good if somebody could invent some sort of clothing that inflated when I went into a seizure so I wouldn't keep hurting myself? I'm luckier now as I'm only having seizures in my sleep. Because my epilepsy didn't respond well enough to the first two medicines we tried, I had to go on to a third medicine. Unfortunately, this made me very ill and I ended up having valproate-induced encephalopathy. The team had to work really hard together and quickly to come up with a plan to get me off the valproate and introduced another medicine that might work for me. All through this time, I felt very safe and secure and knew that the whole team was working really hard to help me. I think my team would probably say that I'm really quite an easygoing patient. I actually really like having my blood taken, as long as they promise not to take all of it. I've only really felt uncomfortable when I had a reaction in my arm to an infusion of a new drug. The reaction felt like a really long burning on the inside of my arm, and it just wouldn't stop. Despite antihistamines, the only way to stop me shouting out in pain was to slow the infusion rate right down. That was all 6 months ago now, and I've been relatively stable since then, although all this growing does seem to be causing a bit of a challenge. I hope you've enjoyed my story. Thank you for listening.